introduce everybody with our panel moderator for this afternoon, Mr. Hugo Gagnon, CEO of PhenoSwitch Bioscience, based in Quebec.
So like I was mentioning while my mic was mute, I will not put the presentation in full screen. It's just a guide to help people follow what we are discussing. If I put it in full screen, I will not see the panelists anymore. Unfortunately, I don't have a 3-screen setup yet. Okay, so I think what we will do, we have a little bit more time than anticipated. We can do a very quick roundtable, so everyone present themselves with a short 2-liner. Well, Sam already presented me, and I present today, so I will not elaborate much more on that. So PhenoSwitch Bioscience, CRO, doing LCMS. I'm the CEO. So who is going next?
I'll jump in. Jim Keith from mStop Limited. We're developing the first specific therapy for TPA-associated severe hemorrhage, and I've been a in vivo pharmacologist for over 40 years and seen in vivo go to in vitro, and now we're coming back to systems biology, systems pharmacology, and the intact organism again.
Great. And who will be the next?
I can go next.
All right.
I'm Marcy Glicksman. I'm the head of biology at InClear Therapies. For 30 years, I've been developing or working to develop better therapeutics for CNS and other therapeutic area diseases. I've been both actually in industry as well as in academics, running a drug discovery center in academics. So I've seen both industry and academics. And InClear Therapies is developing a therapeutic device for CNS diseases, including amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS.
Great. So another one.
Happy to go next. Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm Jo Washney, founder and CEO of Verisym Life. I'm a veterinarian with PhD in comparative oncology and computer science. It's a pleasure to be here. I was a part of the panel previously as well. What Verisym does is we have a patented computational AI-driven technology that simulates physiological indications and interactions between different animal systems and human systems to predict the various translatable problems that we see across in vitro to in vivo or from in vivo to human clinical trials. We work with companies at all ranges from small to mid-sized startups to biotechs and pharma companies, as well as we have internal drug assets program to develop very specific rare disease program for ourselves. Thank you.
Right.
Okay, so I'm Alexander Lazarev. I'm the Chief Scientific Officer of Pressure Biosciences. We focus on using high hydrostatic pressure as a thermodynamic perturbation tool for controlling protein conformation, for looking at biological sample preparation, and a few other things. And I will tell about, about it more tomorrow. My background is in mostly biochemistry and proteomics, although I've been growing up in a family of Russian physicists, and I learned how to build equipment back then. So this is what I'm doing. Thank you.
All right. So who's next?
I can go next. My name is Mahesh Narayanan. I'm the president and CEO of PepVax. My co-founder, Dr. Anton Dormer, had just presented a little while ago, but this is a quick overview. PepVax is developing a novel DNA-based drug delivery platform called SmartMid for cell and gene therapies to, in essence, move a lot of the engineering and development of these treatments directly inside the patients. Thank you.
Great. And another one.
I can go next.
Is Thomas? Okay.
Thomas. Yeah, so I have over 20 years of combined drug discovery and development experience in both small and large molecule therapeutic modalities. I'm currently the CSO at a startup named Bicara Therapeutics. Yeah, so Bicara is a clinical stage biotech. We develop novel bifunctional antibodies in the immuno-oncology space.
All right. There's still 3 panelists to go.
I can go next. Yeah. So my name is RG Chakravarti. I'm the CEO of Fractal Therapeutics. We have 2 sides to our house. On the one side, we do model-based drug development. In particular, we help a lot of small companies put their IND packages together, from the in vivo pharmacology and DMPK work all the way to the to writing up the pharmacology sections. And in between, what we do is we do the PK/PD modeling for all of the first in human choices. What's the right dose? What's the right schedule? Those kinds of things. We also work on early clinical development as well. My own background is I've been both a mouse killing pharmacologist, an in vivo group leader, that is, and a biomarker team leader for a number of years at Takeda. I spent about 15 years at Takeda, and as the cliche goes, roles of increasing responsibility, spanning computational biology, in vivo pharmacology, and then I was a discovery project leader for about 7 programs in-house. So I've sort of had the unique perspective of being both a line manager on the computational side, as well as a line manager on the wet side. And so what that does is it lets us use mathematical approaches very precisely in terms of how we bridge things in and in ways that are practical and that the agency will respond positively to. So in the past year or so, or in the past 6 months, we've been very focused on COVID. We actually believe that COVID is a bigger problem than people realize, which is kind of a strange thing to say. I'll talk about it tomorrow, but COVID may be here for a while, and as a biological problem, it's a harder challenge than most people realize. So as we all talk about what the new normal looks like, I think one perspective is that new normal may be a long time away. And really sort of my shtick, my soapbox these days is kind of, putting my hand up and saying, hey, we should all be thinking about COVID, both professionally and personally.
All right. So there's Tina. Tina, okay.
Yes, I'll go next. I'm Tina Rogers. I'm a senior scientific advisor with Sinclair Research Center. Sinclair is a preclinical CRO that has specialized for many years in pig surgical models and disease models, especially diabetes. And recently, Sinclair has begun a full service CRO for IND programs. So we do all the studies that are required for INDs and all of the species, all of the typical laboratory species. So today I'm going to provide a perspective from the preclinical CRO, which I think is different from our other panel members. We have different challenges.
All right.
You.
Perfect. So I think I'm the last one.
Yeah.
And thank you first of all, thank you for the invitation. It's great to be among such esteemed panelists here. I'm Ashwini Gogare. I'm manager of AI-enabled drug discovery workstream in Malapur Sigma. My background is I'm a chemist, photobiologist, and cheminformatician in my, grad school days. Since then, I've worked on many commercial projects in Malapur Sigma and in my previous roles. Well, about Malapur Sigma, needless to say, one of the largest organizations that supports reagents as well as material for researchers, both on the chemistry and the biology side. We also do a lot of cell synthesis, antibody synthesis, vaccine synthesis, as well as cell production. And so a lot of work has been going on to support COVID vaccine as well. I'm happy to add my perspective here to the panel. Thank you.
All right, so I think that's it for the roundtable around who is who. I prepared a slide. So roughly that's today's agenda. We will have a few poll questions for the audience and we will get back on the results at the end of the panel. Once we ran through the poll questions, there will be discussion panels. There will be 3 main subjects we will discuss, and within those 3 main subjects, I have added the sub-subjects and important things that we wanted to discuss today. And then we will end with a closing remarks from the panelists, and probably, if we have time, ask a few questions before the return on the poll questions to the audience. All right, so let's start with the poll questions. Sam, will you be able to? Yeah, sure. So you should have a first question that just popped in your screen. So how did COVID has changed your organization?
I guess I'll give everyone 10 seconds to answer this. 3, 2, 1.
Is there a second one that will pop? Sam? Yeah, all right. Would working from home become the new normal for pharma and biotech company?
Again, another 10 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Yep.
How COVID has changed the pace of your research once lockdown was ended? If lockdown is ended for you, hopefully it is.
Yeah, I think in France and Germany, Hugo, they just reinstated the lockdown.
Yeah, in France they have changed again.
Another 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1, and then
the last one.
Yeah.
So all location, city, country, state, sultanate, or multi-tenant building of your CRO partners or partners in general was important during lockdown regarding the resilience of their service for your projects.
another 10 more seconds. 3, 2.
All right. So we'll get back on those questions later. So let's first start with the discussion panel. So as a reminder today, the topics is deep diving into drug discovery outsourcing or technology in 2020, how COVID-19 has forever changed the scientific research landscape. So yeah, and unfortunately, there was a bad cut and paste here. So the first question we wanted to discuss all together was how remote work has changed the face of scientific research. I know you guys, when we spoke earlier, we talked about work schedule, meeting schedule, and also someone brought the security of their employees about COVID testing. So let's go around this. So who will first speak about that?
Let me start. I guess I'm a little unusual in this case because we are a small company, or there are only 15 of us, we're public, and yet we represent both instrument manufacturer and the service provider. So what we witnessed is very interesting. So we had to stay open because we support a lot of institutions that have been working on the antiviral drugs and vaccines and basically focusing on these emergency treatments. They also worked on the cancer therapies and diagnostic tools. So essentially we had to support everybody who was still open. And so we pronounced ourselves essential and had to stay in business as usual. We had to restructure how we actually attended common areas, the laboratories and stuff like that. We've learned very positive skills. So for instance, when we had to go to the lab to actually touch equipment to generate data, that was inevitable. We had to schedule, stagger our schedule such that we didn't see each other very close by. But we got to go home to analyze the data and write reports. So this was actually beneficial. So we could actually stagger the schedules without really disrupting the pace of work in our labs. More importantly, what really dropped down is the sales of our equipment because many of the customer labs were closed. And obviously no capital equipment spending was going on for many months. But we actually saw a resurgence of service work because we had more requests for our contract service, mainly because some of the customer labs were closed and they were happily outsourcing work that we could provide. And our service work was mostly on protein structure, protein refolding, and this were actually, so we were able to maintain our business and avoid furloughs or layoffs, simply because there was the nice balance that, one major part of the business dropped and the other part actually managed to compensate for it. That's my experience.
Yeah.
I think we also learned very, very good skills with the tools that we're using at the moment, all the virtual tools that help us to save money on travel.
Yeah, sure.
I was very pleased in Boston. Traffic was non-existent. This was the first time I've ever experienced this.
That's one thing that is recurrent. Commuting is much more easier when you have to commute. It's much more easier, and
I was astonished. I came to, let's say, Harvard campus, and I was parking on the street at the meter. There was 5 meters available, and I was just, oh yes. So I guess there were positive moments we're trying to look for in this whole time.
Pandemics are funny that way.
Yeah. One thing we had discussed, and one thing I've seen on my side is that we have to rethink a lot the 9-to-5 schedule because, for example, during ourselves, we were also open during the lockdown, but we had to take care of the kids. So trying to work from 9 to 5 was nearly impossible because you have to take care of the kids. So you have to change a little bit your schedule, and this is something that I think was good for some at some point because they kept that habit, and now they have included more workout during their day and some work before the end of the day. So they have just changed how they think about this. Yeah.
Although there is a downside to that in that you could extend your workday. Because even when you're taking care of family duties, you're still thinking about a meeting that just occurred and anticipating the next meeting that's going to occur after dinner or after the kids are in bed. And so, that was a lesson that I actually learned several years ago when I had a laboratory that I was responsible for in Singapore, and I was based in Boston. And so, you could find very quickly, I found that people expected you to work 18 to 20-hour days to take care of things that happened at the beginning of their day and at the end of their day. And so you have to draw a line, or otherwise you're going to actually burn out from actually working more than you would, as opposed to, when you've got that commute to de-escalate from the workday as you head home. And, so you have to keep even more in front of you that work-life balance.
Yeah, we bring here that, well, the company must do for COVID-19 testing for their own employees, but probably there's some a moral right that the company has for the mental health of their employees. Right now, there's a lot more nervous breakdown than there was before. People are more anxious. People have more depression. I've seen here, actually in Quebec, the amount of divorce has increased very, very badly. So that's something I think people need to think about a little bit. Like you mentioned, Arjit, it's not only a virus. It's maybe it's even bigger than that.
Yeah, and I think we've been virtual the whole time. So since we started 4 years ago, we've been virtual. And what's funny for us is that our customers' expectations have changed. People are working on a much more protracted schedule. So people think nothing of emailing us at 9 o'clock at night and saying, hey, I'm still finishing that up. Do you have some time to talk? Which wasn't the case when everybody in biotech, pharma, and Boston was working these very strict 9 to 5 days. Biotech has a culture of being very 9 to 5, I would say, or biotech and pharma in the Boston area at least, or in the US at least. And that culture is shifting. It's becoming more like academic culture. So people will actually email you late at night, and at 8 o'clock at night, people will say, hey, can we talk a little bit? So managing expectations from partners has become an interesting, and it's in some ways it's a, you can say it's a good thing because it definitely has picked up, the pace has picked up, which is, from a business standpoint, there are many industries right now where there isn't enough work. So in that respect, it's a bit of a first world problem to have. but also then you have to be somewhat strategic about how you manage your own time. And we talk a lot with our team about burnout.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
In this respect, I keep hearing from my large company colleagues that they've noticed that the number of people who play solitaire in the office had drastically dropped.
Exactly.
Because nobody's watching behind them, right?
Right, exactly.
They have to deliver based on the list of things to do and not 9 to 5 being in the office. So that's great.
I would say, at least coming from a larger organization, being part of that, and that's also driven by commercial, right? I would say two important things. One, that we've seen customer access has become much more easier because customers seem to be more available. And this whole notion about traveling to see a customer, right, that has reduced. And so when we say customers, all biotech, pharma, and researchers have gotten comfortable with, getting on a Zoom call like this and sort of, having that communication, which I think is positive for sure. But also it drives a question that was that human interaction, how important was that? How important were that water cooler chats? How important was to meet a client in person and sort of have that relationship built? And I think that's something I'm curious to see how it turns out post-pandemic, which one of the questions I think you'd asked in the poll was, would this stay as new normal? And with regards to personal, like within the teams, I've seen a lot of people who were, and I know it might be a cliche, but when we think from a psychological perspective, right, there's some introverts and then extroverts. So very technical oriented people, focused. I think they have, from what I've been hearing, they enjoy their space. They've been enjoying having that, not having to go to work at that travel, but utilizing that time to get things done. But I feel a lot of extroverts that need to see more people could be suffering in the process. Just the fact that you get out of your family, or get out somewhere, go for a walk, or you meet someone, a colleague, or in a meeting, I think that was important to some people. And I think you can see sort of contrast between some people adjusting really well to where, like you mentioned, some people who have been struggling in the process.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because I think scientists really thrive on being able to have those discussions and being able to spontaneously have discussions in which that spontaneity, doesn't really exist very easily now. So, but I have heard that from others, the people who tend to be less extrovert, more, as classical nerds, are like thriving, because they can just stay home. There's no pressure, to socialize.
I think that there is I think many have mentioned already, but that I think we've been virtual, just quite similar to Arjus and quite a few other people here. We've been quite virtual even before the pandemic. I think now it's, we've kind of really haven't changed our operations for internally. But I think there has been a change in that work-life balance where I'm definitely spending more time throughout the day with meetings rather than certain set of times with meetings. And also in terms of within the team, especially if you have to work in a lab and so forth, I think that's definitely taken a hit because we can't have as many people in labs. And so looking at social distancing and, do you have to move to a bigger space or going to this particular topic, do we have to use CROs and kind of do some of the work externally as we are working internally as well. So I think there's been a lot of change in how we work as a company, even though we're small. I think there's, we have enough clients around the world that we are usually up most of the day, but
this brings up a question. Did virtual companies add edge during the pandemic? Because they were already all set up. So compared to the one with big labs.
I think so. And I think also the perception around virtual companies, I think when we started out 4 years ago, people would raise their eyebrows. Oh, you're virtual. Where's your office? That's gone. No one says that
it's
anymore.
Possible. Yeah, it's possible to do it.
Yeah.
And I heard stories here from employees and their wife working somewhere else and their husband working somewhere else, where I would say that some boss has difficulties to adapt to the fact that the employee is not there 9 to 5 hands-on. So that's something that maybe will give even companies who has been able to adapt edge actually for that. I think on that, yeah.
I share my perspective and my experience. So my company, Bicara, has 2 physical locations. One in US, Cambridge here, Massachusetts. The other one is in Bangalore, India. So arguably 2 of the countries that have the most highest COVID infection rate recently, or at least a resurgence. It did result in, and then my R&D team is based in India. The so-called virtual team is based in Cambridge, right? But we all feel the same pain in that there is a significant delay in timelines. A lot of reagents, for example, have to be shipped right to India, but the frequency of flights going into India has gone down tremendously. So now we have to plan our experiments 1 month ahead, ordering stuff way in advance. Even as we think about outsourcing to CRO, we are starting to, hear from CRO, we gotta give them months ahead. Like if you want to do a monkey studies, the CROs that we used to work with said because of COVID and vaccine study, these all have to be planned months ahead now.
They got overwhelmed. Yeah.
Right. And in addition to you have to plan months ahead because of the supply issue. People don't realize how the monkeys have to be conditioned when they come into the facility to meet the USDA requirements. And then because of that supply and demand, the cost of the animals has significantly increased.
Yeah.
And so you have that as well.
Our R&D timeline has been moved. And then lastly, I would say we are now back to, because of the high infection rate, we have employees who tested positive. And so they have to be quarantined. And we have a rotational basis, people coming in and go. And then on top of that, because of the time zone difference, instead of having a group meeting with most people, now even that has to be on a rotational basis. So I think it does. This whole COVID-19 has changed the landscape of scientific research tremendously. I don't see how any other way to say virtual companies will benefit in certain ways. It depends how you define a virtual company.
Yeah, it depends. It brings back to the poll question: where is the CRO located? Where in your case, it was not a good time for your partners over there because they were in a place where it was a bad time to be. All right. We'll go on the next.
I did have one topic to weigh in on, which was around the COVID testing. So we've been, we're working on COVID. We have our own assets that we're moving forward, but we're also doing a lot of modeling around COVID itself and kind of like looking also from the epidemiological perspective. We have some collaborations going on with BU, with epidemiologists there. And we asked this question of, is symptomatic isolation good enough? How much impact does it have? How tricky is this? How do you stay open? And we have a paper out there. It's called This Time is Different. It's on medRxiv. You can take a look at it. But what we found was that symptomatic testing, hey, stay home if you're sick. And people already know this. It's almost completely useless. It's, what people call hygiene theater. Because most people are infectious before they're symptomatic. So symptomatic testing has almost zero impact on controlling the spread. The only 2 things you can do really, if you want to stay open safely, for those of you who have physical offices, 2 suggestions. One is try to reduce the R0 indoors as much as possible, knowing that that's extraordinarily high because there is evidence for aerosol transmission. So if you're indoors, it's 19 times more likely to spread. The 6-foot rule does not apply indoors. And it's quite literally how long that space has been occupied by someone else before you came in. So one of the things is to try to limit the R0 indoors with, for example, HEPA filters, using N95 masks when people are indoors, and treating surfaces as contaminated, which is less important than the aerosol transmission. But the other one is doing rapid and widespread surveillance testing of almost everyone. And if you have a case and you use the CDC rule of, well, we want 6 feet away from someone for 15 minutes so we're safe, you might be disappointed later. So if you do get positives, take a very long, hard look at your quarantine protocols because this virus spreads really easily. So rapid testing and lots of it is really key. limiting the R naught internally is really key, and thinking through how you're looking at your quote unquote close contacts, because the CDC's rules are a joke. Don't trust them. Those would be my 3 recommendations.
Yeah, I think that there's one thing. So internal testing for a company is right now is quite difficult because, well, actually here in Canada, the quick testing kits hasn't been made available to public. They were reserved by the government. So that's a problem with the supply. Even I would say I have even difficulties getting my tips and my gloves. So that's something. So when you think about that, so it's very difficult for a company deciding to test unless we develop our own test, which will not be FDA or Canada Health approved. So that's a big issue. I think that's something that should have been brought very much more quickly and addressed very much more quickly. The companies that would have needed that rapid test kit, even though that the accuracy will not be very good, you need something just to screen. At least if you have a red flag, you can just stop, go to make a real test, and then reopen if it was a false positive. But it would have been mandatory. It would have helped a lot, I think.
And there's a paper, sorry, just real quick. So Michael Mina at Harvard, the Harvard School of Public Health has a paper that shows that the turnaround time for testing is much more important than the sensitivity of the test.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you need to raise a flag fast and then verify. So that's the idea.
And we just have Dr. Paula, Chief Scientific Officer, joining us right now as well.
All right.
Yes, hi everyone. Sorry I'm late, and sorry for the noise. I'm late because they're destroying my house downstairs, and and as a consequence, there is going to be a lot of noise. But it's a pleasure meeting you all, and I was listening to your conversation, and to be honest, my experience on that regard, especially with the CRO, it has not been that bad. I mean, they actually deliver the data on time when it comes to preclinical data. Nevertheless, we had issue on some of the CRO that have to validate certain kind of processes, right, for experiment that they're needed as a quality control for our product. And in that case, having those kits at those CROs has been a kind of a bit of a nightmare quite often, and that delayed some of the key steps we had to take. And yeah, and thinking about the clinical trial, there is no doubt that COVID had an effect and a strong impact on those patients, right? That they were not that willing to go to the clinic, even if they were not feeling that well. And as a consequence, the recruitment of the patient is getting harder again. We had like a moment in which it was getting better, but now is hard again.
Yeah. I heard that too. For the clinical side, it's a little bit more difficult. I think.
Just a quick comment, for completeness, as actually we've been interacting with the FDA, through COVID, and there have been some delays, not extensive delays, but often some delays associated with getting responses for similar reasons. So
by the agency itself.
Right.
Okay. That over that.
Yeah.
So the next question to discuss was how COVID has changed the adoption of new technology, new partner. What are the current challenges regarding this? We started discussing clinical trials, so that there's audits related to that. All the information is diffused. We were used to travel, go someplace, have a meeting. It's not possible anymore. The choice of the partner as well. I've written there CROs, academics, but there are also other companies with which you can interact, and you need to be maybe careful when you make that choice. Will they be closed in 2 months, or they will still be open? So where and how to outsource, and that's an issue around clinical trials as well. Will there have enough patients to recruit? So those are the questions I think we can discuss.
I'm happy to discuss in respect of how COVID has changed in adoption of new technology for us. Given we are very computationally driven technology service provider, we have seen a significant surge in usage of technology adoption in general, especially in large pharma companies where the sales process is quite long. It usually takes 1.5 to 2 years to sign agreement, let alone CDAs take months. And this is not the case, at least what we are seeing anymore. And also we've been able to expand our technology services internationally, which was something would have been a little bit more challenging, given we would have to go travel, for example, to Japan and get them to do a presentation. And now because it's the new normal of like presenting slides and being able to send that out ahead of time, asking questions that what are the specific things that they are looking forward to in a CRO specific partnership, or even in just like adopting new technologies, has been fairly taken into more of an empathic and very much like knowledge driven approach, rather than a more traditional approach of like, hey, let's bring you in, let's meet the team. And it also, one of the advantages that I'm seeing is even for like, we have these assets and we're talking for during pre-IND meeting, folks in general who are advising us towards the FDA application, or specifically IND application, they've all been very open-minded about how to generate data creatively without having to do extensive experiments to really understand what may be the FDA requirements. So in both perspectives, I think we see that there is a new adoption that is occurring, and also it's becoming more time and cost effective, especially for companies like ours where we don't have a lot of resources in terms of financial resources to travel all the time to globally present our data. So I'll leave it to that. Thanks.
I think it's a good point. We've seen that as well. I don't know if it has forced people to adopt the webinar format or the Zoom format because they were not used to that, or they were not comfortable doing it, but now they are okay. And it's very interesting that you say that people are starting to look at new technologies a little bit more open mind than it was. You have an IND, you have to do this to go to the FDA. And now people are starting maybe to say, okay, maybe that kind of study would be good to submit. So that's something interesting.
Exactly. Yeah, and honestly, one of the other things to add, Hugo, to your point, awesome that you are also seeing that, is we also see that leadership teams are now readily available. One of the hurdles we used to have is like, oh, if you want head of R&D or VP of drug discovery to be a part of the same meeting, it would have taken us like months to organize that meeting. And it's not the case anymore. And they're all willing to be a part of the same meeting and interact with us virtually. So seems like hopefully by the end of COVID, this becomes a little bit more hybrid model for companies in general to make more further progress in technology and science in general.
Yeah, having more.
Push. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's going to push all companies to be more agile and more accepting of the technology that make things go faster. And the public, I believe, when the vaccines do come, and I think they're coming fairly soon, the public's going to be have an expectation that new therapies and new treatments can come a lot faster than they have in the past. And so if companies go back to the old way, I think they're going to be left behind, because this new agile way seems to be able to be more efficient and accelerate things.
Related to the diffusion of information, that's the idea. So and actually I've had a recent interaction with a partner, and we are very agile on the way we do things. And when I start a project, I already tell people I will send you a draft report. I will ask you questions. I will send you things that you are not used to see in a report generally, because people are very, very used to have a final report with everything is fine, everything is good, and no questions to ask. And he was a little bit upset by this at first because he's not used to that, because the people working in regulatory environment are very used to have the final figure. And making a final figure takes a lot of time internally without having the knowledge of the science of the opposite side of the table. So that's something that is very interesting doing it that way, I think.
Adding to Joe's point here, in terms of from the technology side, I can definitely say that the importance of in silico and automation is so predominant now that it's never been before. And like they say, right, let robots do the work. And so we see that more and more often now. What used to take quite a long time, let's say 10K compounds in 2 months, you can do in a few hours now, right? And so that acceptance has increased in terms of technology. I feel that mindset for researchers has also become very strategic. They want to think about the science project and the steps involved in it before they start engaging into R&D protocols, given that they don't have much access to R&D, right? Mm-hmm. And so stepping back a little bit and analyzing it more in silico, and then taking those few, those sort of prioritizing what goes to R&D has also become critical.
So it's better science.
For sure.
Yeah, I used to say something that scientists, most of them have forgotten the scientific approach. So they tend to do science without plan, but the scientific approach is having a plan. So that's
right.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're coming back to, what I said before. When I started out, I was a whole animal in vivo pharmacologist. And then as the science developed and gene expression and then gene chips occurred, people got very narrow in their focus. And so everything was going to in vivo or in vitro. And now I think systems biology has actually pointed out the fact that you have to go back to the whole organism. And so it's kind of come full circle.
Yeah, it's a full circle. But today you can produce all the data you need in probably 1 or 2 experiments using omics, contrary to what it was, where to do a 100 protein by Western blot, it was just something that it was a year's work. So
right.
That has changed a lot.
Set the gel up and go home and sleep while it runs.
Yeah.
Kind of expanding on Jim's comment before. Sorry, Alex. I just wanted to kind of throw this through the group. A lot of what we've been doing with COVID has been accelerator in the fact that companies are spending a lot of money already manufacturing, even though they haven't approved their drugs, and they're jumping through steps that are running in parallel that we usually won't do just because of the cost. So is it really more efficient to do it this way? Because I feel like there are going to be a significant amount of these companies that aren't going to get their drugs approved and have spent hundreds of millions of dollars trying to get to that process. So I would like to kind of throw that out there to see is this process more efficient? Or what we've been doing before, was it really, the best way to go? Because I feel like I don't think companies are going to be left behind doing it the old-fashioned way, because that was, I think, more efficient in terms of capital. And if the drug doesn't work in certain phases, you're not spending all that money manufacturing, which itself is a significant amount of costs for a lot of companies. So love to kind of discuss, that aspect of, is it really more efficient the way we're doing it now for COVID versus what we've been doing in the past?
Capital.
Yeah. So there are two big points about that. And one is that if you think about March, it was completely rational for the government to do what they did, right? Operation Warp Speed made all the sense in the world in March, when we thought, okay, here's the pandemic, let's get the vaccine out there as soon as possible, and then we're done with this. Because what we knew about the virus then, that was the best available move to us at the time, right? So in a certain sense, if you just look at it as, look, there's very little technical risk, very little biological risk in making a vaccine for COVID-19, and let's just get the vaccine manufactured as fast as possible. This is an engineering problem, then that was very rational. We now know with the virus that it's not an engineering problem, it's a science problem. There's a lot that can be said about the risks, and you know this very well, I'm sure, Mahesh, but there's a lot that can be said about the science. There's a lot of things a lot of scientific hypotheses, a lot of ways in which the chips have to fall just right in order for the vaccine to work. And so now all of a sudden, we collectively as kind of like a society or even as a species are like, whoa, a vaccine may or may not work. All the scientists say, all the folks who aren't in science say when the vaccine comes, and all the folks who are in science say when we find out whether the vaccine will come. There's a bit of a subtle difference. So there's that one thing of, okay, there's this scientific risk that you cannot buy down simply by spending billions of dollars, right? You can say, look, I want to buy down the scientific risk of flight using a jet engine because I've already invented a jet engine. But if I told you, well, I want to invent a jet engine that runs on cold fusion, you can spend as much money as you want on it. You may not be able to build a cold fusion engine, right? The science may not comply. So there's that one piece of it. But then the other piece of it is what you said, which is, well, what if we're not the first to market? Will we still have a market? And the answer is good news, bad news. And I'll bring this up tomorrow. The virus is going to mutate when it sees antibodies. So good news, bad news. Good news, your product will still be relevant. Bad news, we as a species may not defeat this with one single antibody or one single vaccine. And I think this whole idea that everybody should put all the money into the winner is deeply misplaced because viruses don't work that way.
You need
Right. There's going to be multiple.
Yeah.
I think you're going to have multiple epitopes. And even if 2 or 3 of the vaccines are going after the spike protein, some of the vaccines are actually going to have an effects on other parts of the virus as well. And so it's going to depend on what mutates first as to which one will be effective, and one that's not necessarily as effective now may be effective in the next mutation.
Absolutely. And I think this whole analogy of sort of using a wartime analogy and, shock and awe, I think that works really well when you're trying to impress an enemy government. It works very poorly when you're trying to impress the virus.
Well, we see that firsthand. So some of our customers actually study epitopes. And other customers actually just recently published from Georgetown, very, very interesting lab. They just published the very fundamental paper on glycosylation of the spike protein. And as a result, the whole definition of epitope is totally redefined because it's so coded with N-link glycans, it's never the same. And glycosylation is the metabolic post-translational modification. So if it goes through next person down the line, it comes out with different glycans.
And if it's saturated, if the system is saturated, the glycans ends up being pretty messed up. So
exactly. So essentially, you imagine a bottle brush with things moving all the time. So antibody would not recognize it the same way next time. So we have to be more careful how we approach the vaccine development without full knowledge of biology of the virus. Absolutely.
So to bring back to the idea of cash versus time. Once again, the science brings us back to something else. So it's not the amount of cash you put on one single thing. It's your choice of putting money on different things that may help you later. So that's the thing that we need to be careful about.
Right. So when they say, well, which one is the vaccine? Well, it's the best 15.
Yeah.
When faced with a science problem, diversify, because the more science problems you can tackle, the more gambles you make, the more likely you are to find experiments you're happy with. When faced with an engineering problem, concentrate, because if all it takes is to build it faster and cheaper, then concentrate your resources.
Right. We talk about shots on goal. When I was at Wyeth and Pfizer, many people were, world football, and so soccer here in the U.S. We always talked about shots on goal. If you have more shots on goal, you're more likely to get a goal.
Yeah. All right. So that was very interesting. We will jump to the next questions. So communication and remote work, how scientific information is transmitted between colleagues, peers, subcontractors. So we discussed a little bit about that, about the agile way of doing things. But still, agile is something that is done around a round table usually, So how we do it, how we break those silos, how we make those communication. What is your best tool? What is your best way of doing it today?
Well, we had several chances today to discover that we're still learning Zoom.
Yeah.
Right. But there's lots of other tools that we've discovered recently. First of all, we're all happy because we got to upgrade our internet and all the gadgets that we had, because I realized that my old camera did not work well. My microphone was atrocious and stuff like that. So for serious meetings, for recorded meetings, I had to upgrade all the technology. And obviously that's at home, that's not in the office. So that was interesting. I couldn't actually get reimbursed for my new internet bill, but that's fine because everybody else in the household is using it. I'm also lucky personally because I have two sons, and one is in marketing and the other one is in computers. Actually, so one works for LogMeIn of all companies, so it's basically one of the major tools in this whole telecommunication. And he was complaining that they're losing business to Zoom because Zoom is just free for 40 minutes. The other one requires subscriptions. So they had to redesign their business model to adopt it. And now everybody is losing to Teams, although Teams is not very well defined or designed program, but it's free with the Microsoft Office that everybody now has. And so there's a big fight in that industry as we learn. And all of these tools are different. So switching from one tool to another just before the meeting is a bad idea. Practice is we learned it the hard way. Now, also the other son works for an internet browser company called Brave. It's in San Francisco. He's here downstairs in Boston area, but so he works on California hours. And so we have to kind of work around each other when using the teleconferencing tools and the big office in the house. But I'm learning from them because they tell me, look, this tool is better than ours. Don't tell anybody. But on the other hand, when I encounter some problem with the internet connectivity, I knock on the other door and I said, could you take a look at it? What's happening? And so we had the ad block turned on, so turn it off. Something like this. So we've learned a great deal of things. I also learned a lot of new gadgets. So for instance, Logitech is my favorite camera company, and Jabra is my favorite headset company because they're actually Bluetooth, and I can walk out of the house and I still be on the conference. I've seen some of my colleagues raking the leaves in the backyard on some of these calls and just still talking the way through. So it actually, well, I guess we're evolving to, have that life and work balance. If we need to talk to a customer in China and then next morning talk to somebody in Europe, we have to do something in between and take some breaks to actually keep ourselves in good shape. And so, yeah, some exercise in the yard is probably a good idea.
So to interpret the question a little bit differently, I think the best tool is actually your culture, your company's culture. So the argument can be made that a lot of the shift to remote work is really about productivity and about milestones. And so as a manager, one of the best things that you can do is to actually be really available and to sort of popularize this concept of like pinging people on either like, and the actual platform doesn't matter so much, but ping people either on Slack or email or text, whatever, but to keep that cycle time with your direct reports very short. As a contractor, it's important conversely to have really short cycle times with your customers. So when, being super hyper responsive is something we're learning to do because it matters a lot to create that sense of immediacy and to build a relationship and to build the bond. So, turnaround times of 1 day pre-pandemic were fine. In this current situation, much shorter turnaround times are really required, both, in a customer facing setting, but also with direct reports and up the chain for that matter. So that's one piece of it, kind of just lowering the stakes in terms of every interaction so that there's a sense of immediacy. And the other piece about the culture in terms of being able to transmit information is getting bad news out there as quickly as possible. I think typically what happens is if you have bad news in a company setting, you're going to want to sort of massage it and be like, okay, well, we found this. Now let's figure it out before we talk to the client. What we found is when we find bad news right now under the current circumstances, just because everyone's also kind of a little bit tightly wound, get the bad news out immediately and sort of problem solve side by side with the client.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. It's fun that because Alex, you brought the idea of gadgets or of technology, of tools, but while speaking of it, you also mentioned your family and your home office. So those are two things that are now part of the tools. Do you have a desk at home? and do you have someone around you to help you out with the things that you are not able to handle yourself, or the meeting that you need to schedule at a bad hour? And is your family will understand that you're right now working? So working from home is also having the kids coming up and understanding that you are speaking to a computer and understanding that you are on call. Sorry, my dad is on a call. So they now understand what it is. Yeah, so that's very
That's usually the more problem, because it is hard to convey that concept to a dog, for instance, that decides to tug on your sleep.
Cats.
When they bark, they bark. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's that. Is there someone who would like to add on this?
I think that as far as the other thing about startups and virtual companies is you're also fundraising. And I can speak from personal experience in this era of COVID. It's interesting that when we talk with potential investors now, they're far more available than they were before the pandemic. And when you're exchanging information back and forth with them and they have questions, they expect an almost instant answer when they ask you a question. And so you have to respond even sometimes in the middle of the night if they're on the other side of the planet from you, because they're tightly wound as well in that, and so they're it's interesting. The time urgency has been increased in many ways.
Well, I think we have Marcy and Tina on the CRO side. Is it something that you feel that since everyone is remote, that your clients tends to ask you questions or request feedback faster?
Actually, I'm on the other side. So we're virtual and we depend on CROs.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that I have heard from others that, sort of there's not as many boundaries, and people assume you're going to be more available, and people generally are more available because there's no travel. Mm-hmm. So that makes a big difference. Can't be out of office easily.
No, it's true. Yeah, and I would say that we interact with our clients differently, and we have to be creative about that. We used to depend on new clients coming on site, doing a site qualification or doing an audit if they're a larger company, and they're not doing that now. So we're doing remote audits with our current clients and new clients as well. I'd say in terms of access to the clients, I agree that it's great that you can schedule a meeting pretty easily with the big group of people that are the decision makers on a preclinical program, and it's a lot easier than waiting a couple of months for everybody to get their schedules aligned for an actual on-site visit. So I think access to this decision makers has certainly improved. I think that we try to expedite the things that we can control, and CROs have to be responsive. It's sort of our that's why clients come to us, is for our responsiveness. So we're used to that, and I would just say that the way we interact with our clients has had to change. I'm not going to do a commercial for Microsoft Teams, but I have to say that Teams is a great way for us to interact with each other, because my internal colleagues are scattered all over the country, as well as our clients. And so external people can get into Teams. You can create groups and channels for different projects, and that can be incredibly efficient. We have also started streaming. We can stream procedures for clients that want to see the first day of dosing or some specialized procedure, and also take videos. But we're certainly looking forward to the time when clients can come on site again.
Yeah.
So with regard to that, with the in vivo work, if you're streaming procedures, are you worried about the security of that streaming, given the sensitivity to animal welfare that some groups
right. So we put things in place, right? We require that clients sign a document saying that they're not going to video the stream for our own protection, and that's basically the best we can do.
So they can't record, you know, for example.
No, they can't.
This
right.
is recorded right now on Zoom, and so they
right.
have to agree not to record the session.
Right, and our IT department sets things up in a very secure way.
Okay.
Well, I had an interesting experience. We were evaluating one of the engineering contract manufacturer site, and the CEO was just basically on the call with us, and he said, "Well, you want to look at the machines we got?" And he picks up his phone and just walks down the hall and shows everything around, right. Basically waving his phone. But that was probably the most secure way of transmitting video, because you know it doesn't go through. It's one-on-one. We
right.
had many interesting requests, like from, you know, the real estate industry developed this three-dimensional tours of the home. When you look at, let's say, Zillow, you could walk through the house, and there are cameras placed in certain places, and you can actually turn around and look. So people started buying those devices to do virtual tours of their laboratory space. That's quite an interesting trend, I think.
Well, we had a presentation about the virtual technology today in the meeting. So I think they would have something very interesting for the audit at this point. So they could make virtual tour. It needs to be live, so it will probably require a lot of computing, but it would be something very interesting.
Has anyone used Slack? Did we talk about that?
Yeah, I was on Slack before Teams. I just decided to switch to Teams because we were already on Office 365. But I would say that Teams is a mere copy of Slack.
Okay. I was just going to ask you. We start using Slack in a company for communication.
It's great. It's great. It does allow the same thing as Team, making channel, private channel, and all that stuff. But Slack was designed first for IT companies, so it has more, I would say, coding functionality that you can use in it. So contrary to Teams.
Right.
And I think with Slack, there's a lot of integration as well with other applications that we use. So we have a lot of ELNs that can connect directly to Slack.
Yeah.
We have, we've moved to online storage like Box for a lot of our electronic data storage. And so that can be integrated into Slack. So it's much easier for us to, just click the link and add, and everyone can just see the data at the same time, which before we could do in person. Now we're just doing virtually over Slack. And, we've done a lot of, video calls through Zoom at this point, which is also integrated into Slack. So I think that's one good aspect of Slack that we do like, and we've been using it for about 3-4 years now. So the pandemic really didn't push us towards Slack, but I think we use it more now because of not the integration that we had to do with Zoom and Box and everything else, our ELMs and so forth. So it's a great tool. I don't know if Teams has as much integration with those.
There is, but it's a little bit, I would say that it's a little late if you compare it, because Slack is open, so the integration tools can be written and integrated very fast. But Team is a Microsoft base, so and also there's a Microsoft partner. So you will see the Microsoft partners tools first, and then you will start seeing other stuff after that. But still, there's a lot of integration. But if you're already on Office 365, it's just a matter of not having to pay for another platform and all that stuff. But if you have your emails elsewhere, I know that Google has started with Google Meets and all that stuff, but Slack is very well integrated to Google Tools as well. So that's I think that's the difference, and it's something very within our company. It has been there for a while. It's very important for me. Communication with employees, and employees get back to me if they have their questions. And the only thing that people needs to be aware with those communications tools, it's meant to be a delayed communications tools. People use it a lot as a chat, but you need to learn that if there's some request that enters in a channel that is not urgent, you can read it later. So that's the difference. It's not like on your phone where you need to reply very quickly. You need to actually make different channels for something urgent, something that's not urgent. This way you don't get bothered by all the pop-ups and the bells that comes out.
But I think the other advantage that we saw, at least since using Slack, is the number of emails that cluttered totally, was gone after Slack, because all the messages coming through Slack internally. And so the only emails we were getting from our work emails were from our clients or potential customers, investors. So it kind of made that aspect much easier as well. As I wasn't just cluttering my email with internal emails and external emails. Pretty much everything that's coming through my email now is external, so I know I can reply to that when I need to, so urgent or slowly. And same thing with Slack. If it's coming directly to me, I know it's probably faster than it's coming through one of the channels. I can take my time replying. So definitely takes a little bit of compartmentalization, and takes a little bit of training everyone to use it in certain ways, because it takes a while, especially if you haven't done something like this before. It took us about 6 months just to get everyone on it and working on through that, rather than me texting me and saying, "Hey, I want to talk to you." It's like, wait, just use Slack. So it took a little bit of time, but after a while, everyone got used to it.
Yeah, we may be getting there.
All right. So let's jump to maybe if we have time, we can. Is there any audience questions? People that would like us to comment on subjects we already have discussed? Let me wait a few seconds. Anyway, the questions can be asked while we go over the poll results. Sam, are you able to bring the results of the poll?
Yes.
Yeah, so first result. So how did COVID has changed your organization? So we have a 31% for the best and 44% a mix of both. So there are good things and bad things, and I would expect that as well. There are things that actually we are still waiting for the vaccine to get there, to get back to normal. Will working from home become a new normal in pharma and biotech? We have a 32% yes and a 68% not for everyone. I think that's what I was expecting. So some position can definitely be done remotely, but lab technician is in the lab. How COVID has changed the pace of your research? So we have that's funny because it's nearly 50-50. So 38 for a faster rate and 44 for a slower rate. So that really depends on where you are and what you do, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And all location of your partners was important during the lockdown. So here you see that it was very important to, depending on where and what they were doing. So I think that's the take-home message. Get away from Boston. No, but it's still a great place to be. All right. Now we are at the end. I think we may have a question. Okay, no, it's okay. So that's the end. We had a great, okay, Okay, so that's the panelists telling us that they have to leave. We have 5:30. People have a tight schedule. So we had a very great discussion today. We brought many points. I hope helped other companies and other people improving and going through that pandemics. Is there anything else panelists would like to end with? Right now? No, we have covered a lot. All right, so on that, have a great end of your day. And Sam, you take back control.
Thank you, Hugo. Thank you, Marcy, RG, Thomas, Dr. Jim, and Alex, and Dr. Paula. I have the agenda for tomorrow. RG over here and Dr. Alex will be speaking tomorrow, as well as Marcy. So if you have a moment, step in. It's very easy, as you all know, with Zoom. We'll be starting at 8:30 tomorrow, and we'll be finishing a lot earlier, just before your lunch break at around 12:30. So feel free to step in tomorrow for the last half of our virtual event. Once again, thank you everybody, all our speakers, event sponsors, panelists for your support. And yeah, hope everybody here has a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yep, thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.